Alright, so tonight I'm going to be covering the 12 questions that you should ask your wedding photographer before booking them. My hope is that this will help you get on the same page with your vendors, be more confident with the vendors that you choose, and to just avoid any situations or disappointments that you don't want to be a part of down the road or during your wedding planning. So I'm gonna jump right in to question number 1. So the first question that you should ask your photographer before booking them for your wedding is, what is your photography style? Now there's 2 different types of styles you should be asking them about. Well, first of all, you should be thoroughly stalking them and, stalking their website, stalking their Instagram, whatever, to make sure that you like their photos, you like their style, their editing style, their shooting style, and also that their work is consistent. That's very important to make sure that, their editing style is very consistent. And you should also be looking at their shooting style, as in, do they do a lot of traditional posed photographs? Do they do mostly documentary, candid type photographs? Do they do a lot of really creative, artistic stuff with crazy lighting and flash and special effects and Photoshop and stuff like that? So those are things that you should be looking at and making sure that their style is what you want for your wedding, because every photographer has a different style, and you just want to make sure that it aligns with your vision for your wedding. That way you're not disappointed with how your photos come out. For example, anyone who knows my work or has worked with me before knows that my style is very colorful, vibrant. I love just using, a lot of bright and bold colors. I use a lot of red and yellow in my style. And so if someone's looking for, a darker, moodier style with not a lot of color, I wouldn't be a good fit for them. So definitely ask them about their style. And like I said, you should be stalking them on your own to figure out what their style is. Question number 2 that you should be asking your wedding photographer before booking with them is, what is your working style? Okay, so are they going to be a fly on the wall throughout your whole wedding day? Or are they going to be, really loud and take charge and just giving people orders? I mean, personally, I am kind of both for my wedding days. I'm the fly on the wall and quiet for, the intimate moments that you should be quiet, like the first look. I'm going to give my couples their privacy. I'm not going to be directing them and jumping in their face when they have this nice private moment together. And the same goes for the ceremony. It's definitely better to approach it as being a fly on the wall for the ceremony. I'm not going to be jumping up in front of them when they're saying their vows or exchanging rings. So that's important to know ahead of time. You definitely don't want a photographer that's going to be right up in your face for the first kiss. I've seen it happen before. Well, actually it happened with a videographer, but I'm not naming any names, but I'm just saying you want to make sure you kind of know what their work style is. And so that's number 2. Number 3, what you should be asking is, this one is something that you don't really think about, but I've heard a lot of horror stories about this, is, what will you be wearing to my wedding? So I've heard people tell me that their photographer showed up in jeans and a t-shirt. So it's not something that you think about, but it's definitely worth asking. just in case, just so that your vendors aren't showing up to your wedding in jeans. I know I usually wear just like black dress pants and like a black dress top to all the weddings that I photograph. I don't like to wear anything, like obviously nothing white. I'm totally against people, like wedding guests or vendors or anyone, wearing white to a wedding because, hello, are you trying to upstage the bride? But yeah, so I usually stick to just wearing dark colors, black, just to kind of blend in and not be like in the way of anything. I've worn dresses to weddings before, and I wear like shorts underneath, but I had an incident where I tripped in a dress and pretty much everyone at the wedding saw my dress. I mean, I was wearing shorts underneath, so they didn't see anything, but it was still thoroughly embarrassing. So yeah, I just wear dress pants to every wedding now. So the next question that you should ask your photographer is, how do you handle dark lighting situations? Now, I know there's a lot of photographers out there they claim to be strictly, natural light, but when you're shooting a wedding, there are going to be situations where there is no natural light available. So it's all fine and well if someone claims to be a natural light photographer, and that may work if you're getting married outside and it's earlier ceremony and reception, and they're able to get away with it where they leave before it gets super dark out. But I would definitely ask your photographer, how do you handle dark situations? Because especially if you're in like a church, that's always dark usually. Most reception venues, I mean, like I said, once the sun goes down, once it gets dark out, you're gonna need to know how to handle that type of lighting situation. So yeah, I would just ask, do you bring flash? Do you use like constant light? And just to make sure that you've got all your ducks covered and you're confident in your photographer and you know that they'll be able to handle any lighting situation that may arise on your wedding day. Next question, number 5. How do you handle bad weather situations? So if you're planning everything outside, your ceremony, and if you want all of your pictures taken outside, and it happens to be a downpour on the day of your wedding, you're going to want to communicate with your photographer ahead of time to make sure that you both have a backup plan in place in case doing photos outside is absolutely not an option. You're going to want to make sure that you have a backup plan, a possible backup indoor location in place. And again, this ties into the previous question that I covered, how do you handle dark lighting situations? Because if, God forbid, you planned everything outside in natural light and then day of the wedding it turns out to be a downpour, you're going to want to make sure that your photographer is confident with moving everything inside and thinking on the fly. I mean, there are so many wedding situations where the photographer really has to, I know for myself, where I've had to think on the fly like that and move things around like that because you just never know what could happen. I mean, the weather, especially here in CNY, we all know that it was just snowing like 3 days ago, and then the next day it could be like 75 degrees. So you really, really have to, think on the fly and be ready for any type of weather situation, any type of lighting situation. Just be ready to go. So that's definitely a good question to ask your wedding photographer, just to make sure that they are confident in any situation that may come their way. The next question that you should ask your wedding photographer before booking with them is, do you work from a shot list? Now, this is important to know to make sure that no important photos get forgotten. So what I do with my couples is at their final meeting, which is usually about like 3 weeks before their wedding date, that's when we'll sit down and go through like the entire timeline of their day, and I'll get a specific list of all of the different family combinations that they want for the family formal portraits, with their names and everything. And I will have that list with me on the wedding day. So that way I can just go right down through the list. When it's time for the family formals, I'll just be yelling people's names out and check it off when we're done. That way, no important, family photos get forgotten. You're not going back through your wedding gallery after you get it back and you're like, I never got a photo with Grandma or Aunt Mary or whoever. So it's definitely important to make a shot list with your photographer ahead of time so that, like I said, no important photos get forgotten. And I also go through and just ask, is there anything unique that you guys are planning that I should know about ahead of time? Now, with that being said, you don't have to tell your photographer every single photo that you want of the day. Like, you don't have to give them a list of, like, me walking down the aisle, our first kiss, our exchanging of our rings. Because if this isn't their first wedding, I'm pretty sure this isn't their first rodeo if you're hiring them for your wedding. So any experienced photographer is gonna know, how a wedding goes and know that they have to get those important shots. The shot list is more for just like the list of family that you want and anything unique that you might be planning. Number 7, what you should ask your photographer before you book with them is, how long does it take to get all of the images back after my wedding? Now, this is a very important question that you should be asking, and you should make sure that it's also outlined in your contract, just because I've heard so many horror stories, and I've seen it happen to friends at their weddings where it's taken like almost a year to get their photos back after the wedding, which is just crazy. So yeah, just definitely make sure that you communicate that with your photographer before booking with them so that you're both on the same page with that as far as turnaround time. So yeah, the turnaround time for my clients is 6 weeks, and I have that outlined in my contract. So yeah, that's that. And question number 8, what you should be asking your wedding photographer before booking with them is, how will I receive my images after the wedding? Now, that's an important one to discuss, just so that you're both on the same page, because every photographer does it differently. Some photographers will do an online only gallery that you can download all of your images from. Some photographers will do put them on a USB drive. If you don't know what a USB drive, like this. And I don't know if people still do like discs, but some people might still put photos on discs. So it's definitely important to discuss that, to know how you will be receiving your images after your wedding. What I do is an online gallery and also a USB drive like this. So the next question that you should be asking your photographer before booking with them is, do I have rights to my images? Now, just to clear things up, because I know there's a lot of confusion with this, a lot of people think that rights means copyrights, and there is a big difference between copyrights to images and printing rights or personal usage rights. I really don't know any photographers that would give up full copyrights to their images, because that is like copyrights are saying that like you own the images, you know, afterwards you're allowed to use the images on your website or for like a publication or something like that. If you give up full copyrights to your images, that means that the photographer doesn't own them anymore. So I don't know about like any photographers that would give up full copyrights, but as far as, you know, printing rights and usage rights, that is pretty standard for wedding photographers to include that in their packages or contracts. So it's definitely important to ask your photographer, do you have rights to the images, and what kind of rights do you have? I know I give printing rights and personal usage rights to my clients. So it's definitely important to know what you're getting with that before you sign up for it, and also make sure that is outlined in your contract as well. The next question that you should ask your wedding photographer before booking with them, and this one's also very important, is have you ever shot a wedding at our ceremony and reception venue location? And if not, do you plan on going to scope it out ahead of time? If they have, great. If they have not, I highly recommend. If they have not, that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. I know for me, when I get to shoot at a new venue, it's great for me because I feel like it's just a new experience and new ways for me to be creative, and it really like sparks my creativity. But if they have not shot at your ceremony location or venue location before, I highly recommend asking them if they'll go and do a walkthrough with you. So when it gets like close to your wedding, you know, just take them. You can meet them there at both locations, or if it's all at one location, you know, have them meet you at your venue. That way you guys can do a walkthrough together. And I suggest doing it around the same time that like your ceremony and reception will be taking place. So if your ceremony starts at say like 4:30 and you're able to meet there like on a weeknight or afternoon at 4:30, that would be ideal, because then your photographer will be able to get a clear idea of like what the lighting situation and everything will look like at that time at your venue. So if you guys are able to do a walkthrough, that would be great. And it's also great because you'll be able to just kind of like tell them your vision, and they'll be able to understand more like different locations that you have in mind as far as taking photos, and they'll be able to check it out and let you know if that's a possible location, or if they see something that they think it might not work, they can let you know. If they find a different location on site at your venue that they think would be better, they can kind of run it by you beforehand so that you don't run into any issues on the day of as far as not liking the location, or a location that you really had your heart set on is not going to work. So definitely ask your photographer before you book with them, have you shot at my venue? And like I said, if they haven't, it's not a problem, but just ask them if they would be willing to do a walkthrough with you ahead of time. And it's also great because you'll be able to talk about any restrictions that might be imposed by the venue. Like for example, at a church, I know some Catholic churches can be strict. Are there certain areas that you're not allowed to, that the photographer wouldn't be allowed to walk or be during the ceremony? Would they be allowed to use flash or not during the ceremony? So those are all questions that you want to talk about ahead of time. And the next question that you should be asking your photographer before you book with them is, do you have backup equipment? Okay, so you want to know what happens. What if your camera What if your camera breaks in the middle of my wedding? What happens? Do you have a backup with you? God forbid your photographer only brings one camera with them and it breaks, and then you're SOL for the rest of your wedding. So it's definitely important to ask them, do you have a backup camera? Do you have backup equipment as far as, backup flashes, backup memory cards? I know I am super crazy about that. I'll show you guys. I actually have it right here. So every wedding I wear this. It's like a harness that goes around me. And so I always have 2 cameras. They attach to here and they are at my side. So I have 2 cameras on me at all times during the ceremony and during the reception, like intros, first dances, and all of that. And the reason is, 1, so that I always have a backup strapped to me at all times in case one camera just happens to malfunction and stop working. God forbid it's in the middle of a ceremony, all I have to do is just grab the other one and keep clicking away. There's no problem and no shots missed. And 2, I do that because I have a long lens to shoot really far away on one camera, and then I have a shorter lens to shoot close up on the other camera. And that way I don't have to be like fumbling in my bag trying to switch my lens every 5 minutes because I might miss shots, I might get like dirt and crap inside my camera. So that's why I do that. And if you've ever seen me shoot a wedding, you'll see that I'm just like a gunslinger, like slinging my cameras back and forth all day long. I pretty much have it down to a science at this point. But, so that's that. And I also always have this handy bag strapped on me throughout the whole wedding day that my mom knitted for me. And in here I will have like backup flashes, backup lenses, you name it. And then inside I have this little baggie here, easily accessible. So if I ever need like an extra battery, I have backups right there. Extra batteries for my flashes, I have backups in there. And then inside here I also have this case which has all of my backup memory cards. So if a memory card fills up or is almost filled up, I could easily just grab one out, safely put it in the case. I flip it over so that I know it's already been used, and then safely put it away. So yeah, it's definitely worth it and very important to ask your photographer before booking with them. Do they have backups? What is their plan for that? Just so that you're not, caught in a terrible situation where, God forbid, their camera breaks, like I said, and they have no backup and no plan and no way to continue shooting your wedding. So that is a very, very important question to ask. And then the last question I have for you guys, question number 12, is do you have insurance? Do you have liability insurance and equipment insurance? Now, some venues will actually require proof of insurance from your vendors before they allow them to work there. So it's definitely important to speak with your venue ahead of time. Ask them if they require that. And also speak with your vendors before booking them, and ask them if they have it, because you don't want to be stuck in a situation where you book your venue, you book your vendors, and then come to find out your photographer does not have liability or equipment insurance and they're not allowed to shoot at your venue. So that would be a terrible situation to be stuck in. And I mean, ultimately it's just to protect the photographer also. I mean, liability insurance is for if, God forbid, a wedding guest trips over the photographer's like light stand or something and falls and breaks their leg, the liability insurance would be so that your photographer does not get sued and face like a major lawsuit for the medical expenses and all of that. And then as far as equipment insurance, again, it's if a guest would happen to like trip over your light stand, again, your photographer's light stand, and like break their equipment, it's important to know if your photographer has the insurance, the coverage to take care of that, so that you don't have to worry about it, so it doesn't become an issue with the bride and groom. So that's the last question that I have for you guys. I hope this was, oh wait, last thing. So just make sure that you thoroughly read through any contracts before signing them. And if there's anything that you like, if there's anything you need clarity on, make sure you ask before signing them. If there's anything you don't understand, if there's anything that you kind of like agreed upon with your vendors, make sure you, and it's not in your contract, make sure you ask them, why is this not in the contract? Can you add that to the contract? If you have any questions at all about the contract, it is super important that it's all outlined very clearly for you before you sign it, just so that you guys are on the same page with everything. Because like I said, you don't want to be stuck in a situation where you were expecting one thing and you guys you weren't on the same page as your vendors, and then you end up very disappointed at your wedding day or after your wedding day, and I would hate to see anyone stuck in that situation. So that is all that I have for you guys tonight. You're welcome, Victoria. I'm glad you liked it. So I hope this helped you guys. I hope this gave you clarity, and like I said, my hope is that this just makes you more confident, feel more confident in choosing your vendors, and just makes the whole wedding planning process go a lot more smoothly for you. So yeah, I hope you guys have a great night, and I will see you guys back next week with some more wedding planning tips for you.